Welcome back, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's course on the World Order of Baha'u'llah. In the beloved Guardian's final letter in the World Order of Baha'u'llah's letters, entitled The Unfoldment of World Civilization, in 1936, in the context of escalating political turmoil and dire socioeconomic conditions in Europe and America, the beloved Guardian Shoghi Effendi addressed the Baha'is of the West. Although he stated the signs of progress in the development of the New World Order were evident to any fair-minded observer, he warned that concurrent with that rise was the downfall of those powers and principalities that have either ignored or opposed the onward march of the faith. This process of mystic, all-pervasive change, which the Guardian describes, is twofold. On one hand, it increasingly engenders oneness and cohesion. On the other, it disrupts an already ailing world, forcing mankind to abandon its hollow and outworn institutions and its obsolescent doctrines and beliefs. In further elaborating on this simultaneous and paradoxical process of integration and disintegration, the beloved Guardian Shoghi Effendi draws an interesting parallel between the incremental evolution of global government and society and the period of crisis preceding the eventual foundation of the United States of America. The beloved Guardian Shoghi Effendi states that the moral and social gloom which characterizes humanity's state of collective adolescence would lead to its maturation and prepare it for its inevitable unification. He also emphasizes that this coming of age would accord with the existing operational structure and animating spirit of the administrative order. The beloved Guardian Shoghi Effendi attributed the fall of Shia Islam and the Qajar dynasty and the receding power of the Sunni caliphs of Constantinople to the rampant rise of secularism in the East. He explained that the sovereign leaders of these faiths and empires were the authors of their own demise by attempting to obstruct the advancement of the faith and by failing to heed Baha'u'llah's warnings. In demonstrating this, the beloved Guardian provides examples of Baha'u'llah's messages and describes the fate that befell those who disregarded his call. He parallels the plight of Islam with that of Christianity, foretelling that the forces of irreligion, of a purely materialistic philosophy, and of unconcealed paganism would trigger its downfall. Unbridled industrialism had overcome the erstwhile Christian world, and a concomitant rise in nationalism, inculcating in due course the deification of the state, would unavoidably result in a marked weakening of the Church, a grave diminution of its spiritual influence. The beloved Guardian Shoghi Effendi also points to a widening gulf between liberal and fundamentalist denominations within the Christian and Muslim faiths as being a contributory factor to the weakening of their influence. The beloved Guardian Shoghi Effendi explains that the progressive decay of these religions will result in a phase of decadence, perversion, and corruption in human conduct, and that political disarray and economic strangulation, as well as the inefficacy of multilateral governance structures on the global stage, were a direct consequence of humanity's morally retarded state. However, he applauds efforts made by the League of Nations member states in attempting to develop a sufficiently forceful collective security system, and quotes passages from His Holiness Baha'u'llah's writings on the subject. He also stresses that it is only through the regulation of the use of force and the development of a commonly acceptable international executive mechanism that the oneness of the whole body of nations will be made the ruling principle of international life. The time of nation building, he underlines, is at an end, and the insistence on preserving absolute state sovereignty is counterproductive to the oneness and wholeness of human relationships. Beloved Guardian Shoghi Effendi concludes by emphasizing the non-sectarian, rigidly non-partisan, and supranational nature of the faith. He explains that His Holiness Baha'u'llah foresaw the inauguration of a universal system of governance and the establishment of a world language, currency, script, and system of measurement. Dear friends, we will share with you now some quotes from this remarkable document. The first quote comes from page 163. States, the revelation of Baha'u'llah, whose supreme mission is none other but the achievement of this organic and spiritual unity of the whole body of nations, should, if we be faithful to its implications, be regarded as signalizing through its advent the coming of age of the entire human race. It should be viewed not merely as yet another spiritual revival in the ever-changing fortunes of mankind, not only as a further stage in a chain of progressive revelations, nor even as the culmination of one of a series of recurrent prophetic cycles, but rather as marking the last and highest stage in the stupendous evolution of man's collective life on this planet, the emergence of a world community, the consciousness of world citizenship, the founding of a world civilization and culture, all of which must synchronize with the initial stages in the unfoldment of the golden age of the Baha'i era, should by their very nature be regarded, as far as this planetary life is concerned, as the furthermost limits in the organization of human society, though man as an individual will, nay, must indeed, as a result of such a consummation, continue indefinitely to progress and develop. And dear friends, this extract is from page 169. Deep as is the gloom that already encircles the world, the afflictive ordeals which that world is to suffer are still in preparation, nor can their blackness be as yet imagined. We stand on the threshold of an age whose convulsions proclaim alike the death pangs of the old order and the birth pangs of the new. And this extract, dear friends, is from the World Order of Baha'u'llah, pages 187 to 188. The recrudescence of religious intolerance, of racial animosity, and of patriotic arrogance, the increasing evidences of selfishness, of suspicion, of fear, and of fraud, the spread of terrorism, of lawlessness, of drunkenness, and of crime, the unquenchable thirst for and the feverish pursuit after earthly vanities, riches, and pleasures, the weakening of family solidarity, the laxity in parental control, the lapse into luxurious indulgence, the irresponsible attitude towards marriage, and the consequent rising tide of divorce, the degeneracy of art and music, the infection of literature, and the corruption of the press, the extension of the influence and activities of those prophets of decadence who advocate companionate marriage, who preach the philosophy of nudism, who call modesty an intellectual fiction, who refuse to regard the procreation of children as the sacred and primary purpose of marriage, who denounce religion as an opiate of the people, who would, if given free rein, lead back the human race to barbarism, chaos, and ultimate extinction. These appear as the outstanding characteristics of a decadent society, a society that must either be reborn or perish. Dear friends, our next extract is from on page 196. Ceasing to designate to itself a movement, a fellowship, and the like, designations that did grave injustice to its ever unfolding system, disassociating itself from such appellations as Babi sect, Asiatic cult, and offshoot of Shia Islam, with which the ignorant and the malicious were wont to describe it, refusing to be labeled as a mere philosophy of life or as an eclectic code of ethical conduct, or even as a new religion. The faith of Baha'u'llah is now visibly succeeding in demonstrating its claim and title to be regarded as a world religion destined to attain in the fullness of time the status of a world embracing commonwealth, which would be at once the instrument and the guardian of the most great peace announced by its author. And another extract, dear friends, is on page 199. How can a faith, it should moreover be borne in mind, whose divinely ordained institutions have been established within the jurisdiction of no less than 40 different countries, the policies and interests of whose governments are continually clashing and growing more complex and confused every day, how can such a faith, by allowing its adherents, whether individually or through its organized councils, to meddle in political activities, succeed in preserving the integrity of its teachings and in safeguarding the unity of its followers? How can it ensure the vigorous, the uninterrupted, and peaceful development of its expanding institutions? How can a faith whose ramifications have brought it into contact with mutually incompatible religious systems, sects, and confessions, be in a position, if it merits its adherents, to subscribe to obsolescent observances and doctrines, to claims to claim the unconditional allegiance of those whom it is striving to incorporate into its divinely appointed system. How can it avoid the constant friction, the misunderstandings, and controversies which formal affiliation, as distinct from association, must inevitably engender? And dear friends, our next extract is on page 202. The long ages of infancy and childhood, through which the human race had to pass, have receded into the background. Humanity is now experiencing the commotions invariably associated with the most turbulent stage of its evolution, the stage of adolescence. And the impetuosity of youth and its vehemence reach their climax and must gradually be superseded by the calmness, the wisdom, and the maturity that characterize the stage of manhood. Then will the human race reach that stature of ripeness which will enable it to acquire all the powers and capacities upon which its ultimate development must depend. And dear friends, this next extract is on page 203. The unity of the human race, as envisaged by Baha'u'lláh, implies the establishment of a world commonwealth in which all nations, races, creeds, and classes are closely and permanently united, and in which the autonomy of its state members and the personal freedom and initiative of the individuals that comprise them are definitely and completely safeguarded. And dear friends, our last and final quote is on page 204, states, "A world federal system ruling the whole earth and exercising unchallengeable authority over its unimaginably vast resources, blending and embodying the ideals of both the East and the West, liberated from the curse of war and its miseries, and bent on the exploitation of all the available sources of energy on the surface of the planet, a system in which force is made the servant of justice, whose life is sustained by its universal recognition of one God and by its allegiance to one common revelation. Such is the goal towards which humanity, impelled by the unifying forces of life, is moving." Thank you, dear friends.